Dario. Brian from the Funny Scream. Brian here. Happy Halloween, Bubby Toes. Let me ask you something. What are you being for Halloween? Now don't answer that. I can't hear you. You know who doesn't need a costume? This man, who already looks like Dracula. This is Dario Argento. He's a movie director known for doing a lot of horror in the 70s and 80s. He made movies like The Bird with the Crystal Plumage and Deep Red, which were considered benchmarks in the giallo genre. Which, if you saw Malignant, you can see that movie copying bits and pieces of that style. But in 1977, he branched out with a little movie called Suspiria. And I love it. So because I'm a dirty zoomer, I found out about Suspiria because, as a much younger film buff, I watched a movie called The Neon Demon. Other people online were like, this is just like Suspiria, or something similar. And I was kind of entranced by my love for the Neon Demon at the time to pay attention to that. And then a few years later, Luca Guadagnino remade Suspiria. Some people got mad, some people loved it. I loved it. And I thought, yeah, I should probably see the original. So, 3 years later, I finally got around to it. Let's go. In Suspiria, you got a dancing student named Susie Banyan attending a ballet academy in Germany, but she's not even in the front door before another student comes running out, screaming about something. Fleeing to a friend's apartment, this student is then murdered. As more strange things start happening around the school, Susie and her roommate Sarah investigate why this student would just run away. And it's because the school's run by witches. I mean, we've all been there. The thing with Suspiria is that the story is still functional and interesting, but not the reason it could come out tomorrow and still be impressive. You can watch any 5-minute snippet and realize it's because it looks like that. Suspiria is nothing special on paper, but comes alive mainly through its visuals. And that's something a lot of movies try to do, but Suspiria is not just a movie that gets away with this, it's one of the best to ever try. Every aspect of Argento's production design has so much thought put into it, making for honestly one of the most visually appealing movies ever made. In the most detached sense possible, Suspiria is a good movie alone because of the set design, the architecture, the lighting, the cinematography. It's all that beautiful. What Argento understood that many others do not is that in order for an aesthetics-reliant story to succeed, you need to come up with a visual style that's just as interesting as a well-thought-out and brilliant script would be. Here's a perfect example. Colorful lighting is seen sometimes now as a shortcut to being artsy if you just slap it over bland cinematography. But Suspiria's set design and costume design is crafted in such a way that considers how they'll best catch the angle and color of each light. This results in a more delicate, engrossing, better-looking image, and it's done for every scene in the movie. And then, for a little movie magic, the movie was actually shot on color film, but then used a different dye transfer process called imbibition, which results in more vibrant colors than the regular chromogenic prints at the time. I'm no expert, but this is why certain early color movies, like Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, look especially saturated and flashy compared to others. They said it couldn't be done, but folks, the science of today allows us to add color to the color. This means not only was Argento responsible for deciding what looked good in the immediate, but that he also had to consider how this incredibly intricate lighting would look once the imbibition process saturated it even further. Furthermore, it's important to remember that focusing on your aesthetics is not a pass to give up on everything else. Style over substance implies substance is still there. And best case scenario is the aesthetic choices you make are ones with an immediate impact on the story you're telling. Susie Banyan is an innocent, childlike interloper into this rouge world of hidden witchcraft. As she leaves the airport, the main theme hangs over shots of the exits, imbuing them with mystery and otherworldly connotations. She steps outside, blanketed in darkness and rain, only to be whisked away through wide shots of the forest. You understand that she is departing into this vast unknown, almost wordlessly. Suspiria comes across like a dark fairy tale. So much, in fact, I think Beauty and the Beast must have been inspired by it, because listen to this music. Until a lengthy exposition scene with Udo Kier in which the film kind of plays its entire hand, laying it all on the table that, hey, the school's run by witches. The only thing that informs our comprehension of the horror is this thread of atmospheric mysticism. By today's standards, Suspiria's brutality is relatively tame, if creatively executed for 1977, so it's the abstract presence of whatever evil's pulling the strings that keeps us on edge. The runaway looks out the window only to see a pair of glowing eyes staring back before she's murdered. The piano player who's kicked out and goes to the Lederhosen bar is killed by something possessing his own dog. The Academy headmistress, Mother Marcos, is shown in silhouette as she lays down to sleep. The mythos of Suspiria is obscured from the characters and audience, but we're given enough to know whatever nebulous evil's pulling the strings has a level of supernatural power and is likely privy to the character's actions. When Susie opens the door of irises, it's not just what she might find that's frightening, but that whatever it is already knows she's been snooping around. It's a normal person brushing up against something much larger than herself, with an occult legacy extending into the past with undefinable indefinites. But then Susie stabs Mother Marcos, and the building somehow explodes. Then she runs away, and the movie's over. Argento was like, story's over, I'm fucking done, bye. It's a good thing the vibes are so good, or else it'd be really anticlimactic. All the music was done by the band Goblin, and as I said before briefly, is pitch perfect. The soundscape they've created for Suspiria is a fantastical masterpiece. 1 minute the music is shadowy, then glistening and melodic. But when shit gets real, they switch out the timpani player for a chimpanzee. Suspiria is a wildly entertaining classic horror film. A perfect balance of creativity and style bringing the best out of a script. There are legitimate hurdles I can see bothering people. Italian movies used to shoot without sound, so everything is dubbed in later. I don't know why they did this, but on the other hand, the horror genre is rarely this rich of a sensory experience. Everything's so wildly colorful and enchanting, without appealing to the superficial, but intelligently wrapping you in a quilt of atmospheric charm. It's even better upon repeat viewings. The first time I saw it, I acknowledged the techniques being used. Seeing it again, it was much easier to let them engross me in the mood of this bloody fairy tale. Movies like this, or Hausu, that cross the waters and still leave an impact on American film culture, particularly in horror, are endlessly fascinating to me. That the sensibilities of cinema can be so potent, they're a universal translator. Suspiria's candy-colored approach to the supernatural has all the grace and wit of a filmmaker at the height of their talents. As some may argue, Argento never got better than this. I recommend it highly and hope you find it as striking and memorable as I do. If not, at least you've offered yourself something different. Real quick, I want to talk about the remake of Suspiria. Ordinarily, horror remakes are groan-inducing, but this one attracted a lot of positive attention online. It's much more aligned with the sensibilities of present-day film buffs, as the script is incredibly detail-oriented. While the lore and characterization are that much deeper, it doesn't come across as spontaneous, which is honestly enough to keep the original worth watching, even though many aspects of the remake have improved. They even got the blessing of Jessica Harper, the woman who played Susie Bannion, as she plays the old doctor's deceased wife. This is the best-case scenario. Two films of unique but equal potency in their approach to the same story. Luca Guadagnino, the remake's director, knew better than to try and step over Argento's vision, while trying to still arrive at a similar focus on atmosphere. You can clearly see the use of color and lighting is not as extravagant, but they delve deeper into its thematic gestures. Instead of simply taking place at a dance academy, the remake suggests the elaborate dancing is how the witches actually cast their spells. The energy of your body being harvested and channeled through these concealed occult rituals is a unique horror of its own that's so fresh and interesting. The nature of that horror is not as mysterious, but instead is much more brutal and disturbing. You have to trade the Goblin soundtrack for Tom York's, but both are a perfect match for their respective material. Either way, you're just sinking into a world of sinister magic. One is fluttering and deranged, the other dark and brooding with a trio of Tilda Swinton performances. It comes down to personal preference, but you can savor the tones and notes just as well for either of them. So we have Suspiria, the cult classic which shines brightly in its own universe of red-tinged fame, but dig a bit deeper in Argento's filmography, and you'll find out it is actually the first film in the Three Mothers trilogy, the next entry coming out 3 years later with Inferno. Inferno is incredibly similar to Suspiria. It may not be as fondly remembered, but the atmosphere is just as thick. Everything I said about Suspiria's visual storytelling applies here too. Like, if you enjoy Suspiria, you will enjoy Inferno, as it's basically another Suspiria. A woman living in New York named Rose buys an antique book titled The Three Mothers, which details a trio of witch sisters presiding over the world in secret, enacting their dark magic. An alchemist named Varelli constructed 3 houses for the witches to live in. One for Mother Suspiriorum in Germany, Mother Lacrimarum in Rome, and Mother Tenebrarum in New York. Rose comes to the conclusion her apartment building is the home of Mother Tenebrarum, the Mother of Darkness. She writes to her brother Mark, who is studying in Rome, and after some suspicious circumstances, Mark flies to New York, confident Rose is telling the truth. And just something to point out about Suspiria in light of this backstory, the head mistress who Susie killed at the end was named Mother Marcos, not Suspiriorum. So as far as we know in Inferno, Mother Suspiriorum is still alive. Just something interesting to think about. Much of what was effective about Suspiria, Inferno does as well. There's still a creepy presence that presides over the characters as they try to solve the string of riddles leading to the witch's den. As Argento expands the lore in fresh and new directions, the fantastical elements are a touch more out in the open. Never to the point where it's overbearing or unbelievable that the Three Mothers still exist in secrecy, but it leans into the mystical bits of curses, magic, and etc. to the point where Mark's girlfriend, Sarah, will, come across a lab full of boiling cauldrons. Or how Mother Tenebrarum isn't revealed until the climax, but manifests as an army of cats to ensure she's always watching and listening. While many of the aesthetic traditions established in Suspiria carry over into Inferno, there are key differences in execution Argento used to help it stand out. Suspiria was colorful to the brim, but Inferno is full of harsh shadows and patches of black amidst the color as well. The sets are crafted around casting shadows that stretch across the frame and envelop the characters, and you'll remember Mother Tenebrarum is the Mother of Darkness, so naturally the influence of her powers is reflected in the house built for her. This is also why more nighttime-looking blues and purples are often the most significant color in the frame. These are not just different aesthetic choices to distinguish Inferno from its predecessor. Argento's same creative eye that gave Suspiria's mysticism its own personality is working to make something that's familiar and with the same basic tools, but ultimately speaks uniquely to the attributes of Inferno. And it does successfully create a unique tone. The environments feel oppressive, like the characters are being swallowed up by the darkness of Tenebrarum before they ever even meet her. And this is all marvelous, but what makes Inferno not as celebrated as Suspiria, other than Suspiria coming out first, is that the story is a little more scatterbrained. Take this scene, where Mark investigates the service entrance to the apartment building. Something inside this air duct causes him to pass out. Then he's dragged away by somebody, and we see this from the point of view of the lady he was talking to. Then he's in the lobby and he's fine. He's given water laced with something that knocks him unconscious and wakes up in a completely different building, but then the next shot is him back in the Tenebrarum apartment and he's fine. There's no connecting tissue to any of these location changes, and I'm wondering what exactly was the point of the last 10 minutes. I also think Susie was a more magnetic protagonist. She's more charming than this guy, or this girl. You start off thinking Rose is going to be the protagonist, but she dies halfway through. And then Sarah dies as well, leaving Mark to take over, and he's kinda bland. Jessica Harper gave Susie Bannion a childlike reactionary innocence, even through the awkward dub. But Mark sees his dead sister's body and barely reacts to it. I'm not as invested in following him around. Whereas Suspiria always set the tone with the Goblin score, this time they got keyboard player Keith Emerson to write the music. And some of his work sounds like a more traditional film score, but then sometimes it feels like Argento must have said, okay, I know Suspiria's music really heightened the horror and mysticism I was going for, but I want this Evil Witch movie to be the funky one. Emerson's score and little quirks like the streets of Manhattan always being empty mean Inferno is infinitely sillier than Suspiria. By the time you get to the ending, that becomes clear. Mark solves the last riddle, finding a crawl space underneath the floorboards of Rose's apartment. This is one of Inferno's many moments of dead silence, where there's no music playing at all. That is, until... Love the Monster Mash ass beat. It's like an evil Rocky training montage is about to start. So Mark finds the evil doctor guy who's popped up a few times, and turns out he is actually Varelli, the alchemist who built the houses for the three mothers. And to keep an eye on him, Mother Tenebrarum was posing as his nurse. It doesn't amount to much, though. She Neil Breen dissolves into a mirror, turns into a spooky skeleton, and Mark runs away. I love the ending of Inferno, because the movie's like, wow, we did it, but Mark didn't do anything.
Get the Harlem station and send more equipment!
And just like last time, Argento ran out of script and the movie ends like right there. Inferno is a goofy but still potent continuation of Suspiria with enough to offer on its own to be entertaining. I would rather it have this haunted house spoopy aura about it than just be a pale imitation of what Argento did before. Even the parts that don't work still clearly leave an impression and clearly came from a visionary point of view to bring you an experience, and they're both marvelous horror movies in their own right. Now, let's talk about an actual piece of shit. Mother of Tears concludes the Three Mothers trilogy, and I really wish it didn't. It's never been this obvious a director was not in the same headspace continuing a property of theirs, even just from the timeline of their release. Suspiria came out in 1977. Inferno, a few years later in 1980. Guess when Mother of Tears came out? 2007. And it is no joke, one of the worst things I've ever seen.
You're my favorite pizza place.
It's a trope that sequels or reboots pale in comparison to the originals and forget what made the property work in the first place. The elements which were key to their charm get stripped away one by one because different people are in charge who either don't get it or think it's a safer financial move to modernize before all else. But Mother of Tears is maybe the most dramatic example of this in history, and Argento was still in charge. Where anything you could have possibly enjoyed about Suspiria and Inferno is flayed off and stomped into the f***ing ground. Starting with the most obvious one, the visuals. What happened? It cannot be overstated just how important the set design and lighting were to the experience of the first two, and there is no attempt to recreate any of that here. Would you be able to even tell these were in the same franchise unless I told you? No, you wouldn't. which means gone too is the visual storytelling and subtlety that accompanied the original's over-the-top aspects. The presence of the Mother of Tears, Mother Lacrimarum, is communicated in only the bluntest, most ape-brained way possible, with no mystery or intrigue even in the minds of the characters. Instead of Inferno emphasizing the mother's demonology but keeping their concealment plausible, the plot of this movie is a lady opens an urn and then the Mother of Tears unleashes pandemonium like the Wish Rock in Wonder Woman 1984. There's a part in Inferno where a witch is staring at Mark while he's in school, and she's still creepy even though she doesn't say a damn word. And then in Mother of Tears, there's a troupe of obnoxious, cackling goth girls working for her. It's annoying, every actor is terrible, and... Okay, that was so bad. I'm actually gonna break that down for a second, because... First of all, that baby is not crying in real life. It is facing the camera, we can see its face, and it is not making those sounds. You didn't even try! Then the baby's crying starts sounding further away before you drop it. And I know you're not going to drop a real baby off a bridge, but is it too much to ask that you hide the jump cut so you've actually transitioned, instead of obviously cutting to another angle of your fake dummy tumble drying its way down into the water? Instead of another great score by a talented musician or band, some asshole wrote some made-for-TV movie soundtrack garbage and smacked it on there.
He began talking nonsense.
This movie has the atmosphere of an accounting office. The sound design is some of the worst I've ever heard in a movie. The dubbing is atrocious to where the characters will be in the f***ing catacombs with no reverb or echo in their voice at all.
Everything's okay.
You forgot what we were supposed to do, didn't you?
No.
I want to properly tell you that it's not just bad in comparison to the first two, it is alarmingly, shockingly terrible. Okay. So, this movie has no style, it has no grace, and unlike Lanky Kong, it doesn't even have a funny face. What it does have is gore. Instead of doing what made him the icon that he is, Argento chases trendy techniques the originals did not need to be cutting-edge horror. The first lady that dies is drilled in her mouth, stabbed in the stomach, disemboweled, and then strangled with her own intestines. It's sad to see Argento's understanding of violence reduced to bumbling shock value. Suspiria was also shocking for its time, but he put effort into making the death scenes look artistic as well. But the use of gore in Mother of Tears is so tactless and bad that even if Suspiria and Inferno had no violence in them whatsoever, they would still be a better use of violence than it. The movie's so convinced it needs an epic scale, which, as I've covered already, kinda destroys the mystery and intrigue that's expected of the trilogy. And the occult aspect of the film is overdone after just the first 10 minutes. But it's also terrible at communicating any manner of size or weight to the stakes in the first place. Every single special effect is horrendous, and although we're supposed to believe there are these massive waves of crime and murder, hordes of people driven mad by Mother Lacrimarum, there's never the sense this is happening on that widespread of a level. There'll be montages of a few people fighting, some guy breaking a car window, maybe half a dozen people assaulting a woman. If you just put cameras in the right places, you could capture footage of that happening literally every day in most cities. And then, even though there's supposed pandemonium outside, and these demons or creatures keep trying to kill Asia Argento, somehow she always finds a place to stay until morning. Are the demons falling asleep? Either way, there is no scope or urgency in this film. Mother of Tears can't even accomplish the things it's betraying its roots to try and do. There's no comparable other thing this movie does to remotely make up for what's been lost. And something the first two movies definitely didn't need, which Mother of Tears prioritizes, is nudity. I'm not a prude, but it's to the point where some scenes I can't even show you because I'd have to
Blur the whole fucking screen.
Cheap sex appeal is like so far down on the list of things that make a movie good. It's just so stupid the trilogy stooped this low in its conclusion. They literally defeat Mother Lacrimorum by ripping her shirt off and burning it, and that starts an earthquake, and she dies tits out because a spire shoots through the ground and impales her on a wall. It's so stupid. I hate this so much. Then the heroes run away, and credits. Well, I guess some things never change. It's one thing for the third entry in a trilogy you love to be the worst one, but Mother of Tears is in a whole other category. This is bottom of the barrel. Just unimpactful gore, nudity, bad effects, no story, and not a single returning positive element from the first two films. It's a movie that's impossible to fix without tearing everything down and starting over. It sucks. You want the Three Mothers trilogy to give each mother a chance to shine, but sadly we'll never know what the Argento who made Suspiria and Inferno would have done to give Mother Lacrimorum a film of equal passion and creativity, a film the character deserves. I don't want to end our time here together on a sour note, so I'll reiterate that Dario Argento may have fallen off harder than any director in history, but he's still a legend of Italian cinema, and Mother of Tears honestly doesn't negate any of his impact. I will watch Suspiria again. I'm sure I will watch Inferno again. In time, the parts I love about those two are going to only grow stronger in my mind. Their swirling colors and the enigmatic world building calculatingly propping up each of their stories, while my memories of Mother of Tears will fade dimmer and dimmer until they barely exist. Always remember, the good art of the world lives on if you just let it.